Morning, Bitcoiners. Missed y'all. Hope you're doing great. Ben, glad to be back with my favorite coffee drinking, sun worshiping psychopaths. We love it. Thanks, Ben. We are indeed all of those things. Wow, you're away from the control panel for just a few days, and the whole world seems to be falling apart. Everyone else missed the anyone else missed the breakup. Yeah, it was not a bad week to not be doing daily content. I think we would have had nothing to talk about, or the same thing the whole time. Moscow time just ain't the same without the breakup crew. Thanks, Greg. We've got some excellent Moscow time saved up. It's amazing. We are so back. Good morning, Breakup Bunch. Good morning, Hoddle T. Missing you, my man. Good morning, Moscow time returns. Amsterdam memories. Yeah, there were some. It was a neat time. I had a great, I really enjoyed it. P-Man, what's up, my man? Good morning, fine folks. Aqua Lodge, good morning, good morning, good morning. Brian, how's it going, my man? Good morning, Bitcoiners. Jason, your sanity fix. Thank you. We see an indication from Jason here that we've got a sunrise. It's a little cloudy and gray this morning, getting dark. Sun days getting shorter. Sun's not up as long, but that's okay. Bitcoin, it's just perfect. It's running perfectly. Perfect. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what is new. There we go. Look at all this. Happy to be back again. So am I. BTC Ballistics. I actually was thinking about doing a show yesterday. Break it up. I'm gonna break it up. So I got home 2 nights ago, a little, not so late, but 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And I tried to do a show yesterday. I woke up about 3 hours early, and but I didn't know what was going on in the world. I was that far out of the loop. So we decided, not a great idea. Anyway, here we go. Are you ready? Are you all ready for some Moscow time? What's the fakest news I could find in the past few days? Some amazing stuff. So Janet Yellen was on in an exclusive interview. This is exclusive, guys. It's Janet Yellen doing exclusive interviews. This is with Sky News. Sky. So Janet Yellen, America can certainly afford 2 wars, U.S. Treasury Secretary says. In an exclusive interview, Janet Yellen urges Republicans to appoint a new House of Representatives Speaker to enable greater financial support to be agreed for both Israel and Ukraine. So that's why we need a new speaker in America, right? We got to send some money over to Israel. They need money. This one's really good. From the Telegraph, right? Everyone's been talking about George Orwell. Now, I've got to tell you, I'm not a fan, right? I'm not a huge George Orwell fan. I'm a much bigger Doors of Perception, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. That's a little more accurate to me. And the book was a little more entertaining. But, people can like 1984. I don't have a problem with that. It's just boring. That's it, right? I find Brave New World more frightening and a better read. But here you go. So a lot of people talking about him these days, a lot of people sort of handing around 1984, the book, right? And the Telegraph in the UK says George Orwell was sadistic, misogynistic, homophobic, and sometimes violent. Biographer of the legendary writer's wife says darkness that runs through 1984 is a reflection of his soul. Okay, so it's not about totalitarianism. It's his soul, guys. It's just George Orwell. He has some problems, and he wants to let you know about his problems. Okay, that was the point of the book. It was to let you know about his own problems, right? That's all he was doing. That's it. Leave him alone. This one's great, right? So Harvard's having a pretty tough week, right? Harvard's not going so well, right? So what's going on in Harvard? Hamas supporting Harvard students beg for donations to support their mental health after suffering relentless bullying over supporting terror attack of Israel. So Harvard, not happy. It's not just Harvard, though. The whole Ivy League is involved in this in the United States. By the way, do you guys all know that the Ivy League is actually a football league? I don't know if a lot of people know that. A lot of people are like, I want to go to the Ivy League in America, as if it was ever some league of extraordinary academics or something. It's not, right? It's called the Ivy League because it was literally the name of the football league that they played in, just so you know, right? So another Ivy League team, right, from the Ivy League division of football, right? This guy's from Columbia University. He refuses to condemn a professor who called the Hamas attack awesome. It was awesome. So I'm not going to condemn that. No, it was awesome. No. This is, of all the trouble going on in Israel, right? There's so much, right? It's every day, right? Every day. Here's the, I think the greatest MSN, whatever, mainstream media article written on this, all right? Israel makes the hormones I need, but I support Palestinian liberation. A large part of the trans community in the US is being forced to choose between our life-affirming transitions and our Palestinian siblings' demand for freedom. Jeez, that's everything at once, right? What a story. So this is these are related to that. Clemson University, not in the Ivy League. They didn't play football in the Ivy League, okay, guys. So they play football in another league, right? I think a better league. I don't know. Clemson. What are the Clemson? The Crimson Tide or something. Beautiful name, a Crimson Tide. Love it. Here's Clemson. Clemson University students march on campus after tampons were removed quietly from the men's bathroom. They're quietly removed from the men's bathroom. So the students have marched, right? That's what got them out of their seats over at Clemson. Speaking of marching and walking, right? It looks like the New York Post is onto something. So Gen Zers have invented a new thing. All right. This is what everyone's talking about, according to the New York Post and according to Gen Zers, right? The Clemson Tigers, thanks you. Who is the Crimson Tide again? Alabama. Yeah, it must be. Yeah. What am I talking about? I knew that. I don't know. I know some of my US college stuff, but not that much. Anyway, we were talking about marching at school. They got up out of their seats, right? Well, this is one from the New York Post, and it looks like Gen Zers are onto something, right? It's called silent walking, right? So the silent walking trend has Gen Zers leaving their iPhones. Can you believe it? Guys, this is what Gen Zers have come up. They leave their iPhones at home and they go for a walk. It's called silent walking. It's called silent walking, right? There you go. It's called silent walking. Isn't that amazing, right? Who'd have thought of that? Who'd have thought of just going for a walk? Jeez, these Gen Zers, nothing will prevent them from innovating their way out of this trouble that we're in, right? I have all the faith in the world that they're going to innovate their way out. We're going to talk about innovating our way out. But here's the last one. Here's the most Moscow-timey thing I could find, and it was brought to us thanks to Community Notes, right? So here we go. Brian, how are they going to know how many steps they took? They don't know. Maybe they get to keep their watches on. Maybe they can keep their Apple watches on or something like that. All right, here's the best one. This is the last one. It's the best one. All right, here we go. So this starts with NBC News. All right, our actual favorite, right? NBC. Again, it just is so close to NPC. Right? It's like one letter, and the B and the P are so close. They're so close. B and P. To some children, it's the same letter, right? To some children, it's the same. So NBC News, not NPC News, right? Don't think, whenever I say NBC News, don't think I'm saying NPC News. I mean to give NBC News the correct letter. So NBC News, right? Says this. Elon Musk has touted community notes as a way to fight false and misleading information on X. NBC News gained access to the system and found that on posts containing known misinformation, few posts were ever corrected. Many fact checks were delayed. All right. So that's their tweet. Okay. That's their tweet. NBC, not NPC, NBC, right, wrote this. So they gained access to the system, right? They gained access to the system. But unfortunately, Community Notes, which they were criticizing, came in and did its Community Notes thing. And what it said, NBC did not access any X system. They accessed a Community Notes contributor. Huh? What? The system is a contributor? No X employee is making decisions. Community Notes algorithm requires consensus for any note to achieve helpful status to display. My personal experience has shown notes Posts added in hours. All right. We access the system. You talk to a guy who works there and knew a bit about it. There you go. That's our Moscow time for today, everyone. All right, there we go. Expert investigators. Specific letters are racist. Assalamu alaikum, Muslim Bitcoiner. There we go. Apple Watch on silent. All right, everyone. All right. Now, let me have another sip of coffee and we're going to get started. All right. So, all kinds of stuff obviously happened last week. My first thoughts are the whole issue with the Middle East. It's a minefield for talking about it, right? There's no way to really talk about it and not say something that will drive this person crazy or that person mad. It is literally the most, let's say, alienating is the wrong word. The most divisive subject out there, maybe the most divisive subject out there, right? And it's done its job dividing people. It has done its job dividing people. But where we're left with all of this fighting and everything that's gone on in the past few weeks is actually really interesting. And I'll explain it, right? So let me just start with Sargon of Akkad, who I love, right? Carl Benjamin. I've been a fan of his. He was one of the original 2015, 2016 folks, like Stefan Molyneux and a few others that were really just fearless in the face of mainstream media, absolutely fearless in giving their point of view, didn't care that the industrial censorship machine came after them, didn't care that they were getting smeared and their characters were getting assassinated, didn't seem to be bothered by any of that. They were like a dog on a bone and seemed to feel like they were right over the target fighting what I already recognized as the front line in World War III. And so Sargon of Akkad has come up with this, I think, amazing thread here, which puts things into context. But I'm going to totally disagree with him at the end. All right. So let's get started. I'll just read what he says. The post is called "Why I Think We Are Effed." He says the whole word out, F in case there's kids watching. I don't want to have your breakfast interrupted by swear words. So here's what he says. The West is experiencing an ongoing collapse of moral legitimacy. It has been for many years. Many of our elites use support for Israel as a proxy for an unambiguous moral good, preventing another Holocaust. This is why our elites are generally leaping to near genocidal support for Israel over Palestine. However, support for Israel is actually not that unambiguous due to the power it exerts over Palestine, and this greatly complicates the moral equation. And just so we continue, just so you know where I'm coming from, I am a lover of Israel, right? I 100% believe in self-defense as a principle, right? Never had a problem with that. The way in which Israel took control of the land itself, right? Whether you believe it's from infinite money or not, they paid for it. They paid money for it, right? And it was a desert. And it was the Rothschilds. There's no doubt about that, right? I've been to Rothschild Boulevard where there's a picture honoring the purchase of the land that made Tel Aviv. The Balfour Declaration was heavily financed by them over 100 years ago. And so that was all a fact, and I continue to say that's a legitimate way. I understand there's other land that came about because of attacks. I think anyone who attacked Israel should lose some land, right? I'm an anti-fragile believer in Israel's own defense. If people attack, I never minded if they took a little extra in order to defend themselves, right? The Golan Heights never bothered me. I've been there too. Didn't bother me that was sort of occupied and for strategic and defensive reasons. If you go there, you realize why it is, because you can see the Sea of Galilee right at the bottom, and you certainly don't want the easy shootings that would occur in order to pollute the water supply. So just so you know where I'm coming from on that, because I want to continue to read. I mostly agree with what he's saying here, by the way. It's only his fears and conclusion at the end where I disagree. But I just want you to know where I'm coming from there, because again, this is complicated stuff, right? So here's what he said. This would normally preclude, however, support for Israel is not actually that unambiguous due to the power it exerts over Palestine, and this greatly complicates the moral equation. This would normally preclude full-throated support for any cause, but in the special case of Israel, our elites are completely captured and, in a sense, view themselves at least project the attitude of fighting the new Nazis and preventing another genocide. This full-throated support in favor of an ambiguous cause naturally creates a large constituency who recognize the inherent unfairness in only one side being properly represented in the political discussion, especially when it appears that the people this constituency views itself as defending is facing an impending bloodbath. I would guess that this is radicalizing the Islamic world and shows us to be, in their view, morally backwards and worthy of fighting, more worthy, in fact, of fighting one another. The main problem that this presents to the current Western American world order is that it is predicated on consent. The West claims to desire a peaceful and stable world in which human rights are protected and nations may prosper as long as they respect certain rules. The implication that underpins the legitimacy of said rules is that they are fair, and any party should be able to find adequate redress given any wrongs done to them. When it is demonstrated that the rule of human rights is actually a fiction that is used to keep the rest of the world quiet, then this system comes to an end. The erosion of this system has, of course, been happening for many years now. Various pretexts have been used many times to justify a breach of the doctrine of human rights, and this has been grudgingly accepted because the benefits of the Western world order have outweighed the damage done by these exercises of power disguised as moral crusades. However, we have arrived at a position where, in fact, the United States has been economically attacking other states after deliberately and systematically attempting to erode their standing in the world based on our own perceived moral superiority. This has created a massive upset in the global economic order and forced the disparate opponents of the West into an economic coalition with one another, whilst massively weakening America's allies. The short-sightedness of this plan surely not the short-sightedness of this can surely not be overstated, as the plan to judo flip the various economies of the opposition to bring them to their knees simply hasn't worked. It has been decades for some of these regimes, and they still persist and have been laying the groundwork for a parallel world economy. Needless to say, as the world's economic hegemon, the United States cannot allow this to happen. However, it seems that it is happening and probably cannot be stopped at this point. I think this is really why the political class is gripped with war fervor over a tiny terrorist-run strip of land. It isn't that there is an existential threat to Israel from Gaza. It is that we are looking at the potential to set off a chain of events that shows the West to not have the moral legitimacy it claims to have, which will unravel its own political alliances and put all its enemies into a righteous coalition against us, whilst destroying the global economic system and throw everything into chaos. The West will need to fight, or the Western elites will lose everything. At this point, I think a world war is inevitable. The West's lack of moral legitimacy is seen in its own countries. A very large percentage of the population of almost all of them has severe doubts about the legitimacy of the governments and institutions of those countries, because the fifth columns that have been allowed to proliferate within our societies have done their work of making said governments and institutions unreliable, immoral, and degraded. The point of the left has been to weaken us from within by sowing moral discord, and they have done a very good job. They have, in fact, undermined our very claims to nationhood, family, and imperium. We do not view ourselves as the legitimate rulers of anything, and the major institutions of every country spend a large amount of their time attacking the majority populations of that country. It is well known that Western militaries have serious trouble recruiting and that we are struggling economically. To say we are being poorly governed as it is an understatement and a half, and everyone knows it. There is simply no passion to fight for a civilization that appears to be in collapse, appears to hate itself, and appears to be vindictive to other states on the world stage. Say what you like about Trump, but he actually seemed able to respect the nations ranged against the US. This goes a long way. Now that time appears to have passed. It seems that in their desperate bid for moral legitimacy, the dominant faction of Western elites are once again driving us into war, whilst the subversive faction of elites are going to stoke the fires of civil war in our own countries while we do it. So that's a pretty interesting thing where he says that it's civil war in our own country and war abroad. It's almost like the Civil War and World War I and II at the same time in America, which I think is exactly what's happening, right? Personally, I think we're in a position of profound weakness. It isn't that our enemies are strong, it is that we are vulnerable and we don't really know what we stand for or why we should do what we do. So we will use Israel as a proxy for the expansion of our power, and this will become an intolerable nightmare for our opponents. and they will probably decide that the best opportunity they will get to escape Western dominance has arrived. It is going to be painful, bloody, and ruinous, but if ever it could be done, now seems like the time. And he says, I hope I'm wrong, right? So I think he is wrong. I think he is wrong. And I'll try to explain why he's wrong. You're supposed to get mad. Yeah. Ever since the event, nonstop ads from the state of Israel. Yeah. Good morning. Glad the show is back. Yeah, here we go. So this is where I'm getting at, right? See, we're getting it, guys. We're getting it. World War III is people against governments, not people fighting for their governments. Indeed, right? So there you go. That's part of why I think it's happening. But again, if you think about the spot we're in, when he says we're in a weak spot, right? We're in a very weak spot. I think we were in a much weaker spot back when he was starting talking in 2015, Sargon of Akkad, and when Stefan Molyneux and all these guys were pro-Trump in the 2015, 2016 time, because their ability to hit these high notes wasn't there. The contrast between the normal media wasn't there. I've mentioned many times that just beautiful Mark Twain quote along the lines of, we don't really know the difference, or we can't tell the difference between good news and bad, right? They all kind of look the same to us. Now, just think about the terrible week that's happened in Israel and Gaza and all these places, right? And now think of what we've seen as a reaction here in America. Well, first of all, the universities, as we saw in Moscow time, are finished. They're finished, right? They'll never come back from this. It's not possible. We've been saying it in the Bitcoin world for a long time. Would you ever hire one of these morons from Harvard? Like, I wouldn't, right? And we haven't. These people would show up at our desk at our recruitment things every couple of years. Whenever the markets were hot, we'd get all kinds of people from Harvard. But the same thing, I said the same thing each time. And I've interviewed many of these people, right? When CoinDesk's offices were in New York City, in both the height of the 2017 market, I had a parade of applicants in January 2018, straight through till May in our event that month and that year, right, 2018. So tons of applicants, tons of people trying to get our jobs, and researcher, data analyst, anyone who'd come from the pipeline of wannabe Wall Street was finding themselves after school looking for one of these jobs. We saw it again in the 2020, 2021 markets, right? Everyone was at home. The folks who did graduate were all looking for jobs. And what I definitely saw every single time was the easiest question. Well, what were you doing when you were at school and not paying attention to these markets? Why should I trust that you'd pay attention to these markets now that you're out of school when you didn't when you were in school? The markets were always open to everyone. You never needed special knowledge. They were never that sophisticated that you couldn't just jump in 2 feet first. I knew many teenagers who had jumped in 2 feet first without any education and done just fine, learned as they went. And so right away, with the speed at which events had operated, I always thought that anyone who'd wasted time in university was a counter signal, right? And indeed, as someone who had an economic and vested interest in what I believe to be the competition for universities, which were the events, I just came back from Amsterdam. I've always described the events that we produce as filling the void, filling the vacuum left from the inability of colleges and universities to keep up with our industry. They can't do Bitcoin. They can't figure it out, right? They're still just hiring. They had Gary Gensler running a whole thing a couple of years ago, right, at MIT. They don't know what they're doing, right? If Gary Gensler is the best they can get to run some of these things, they got big trouble. And that was the best they could get, right? I knew Gary Gensler when he was working for MIT. He came to us at CoinDesk for a job. We let him write. He was writing for CoinDesk. I think he wrote 1 or 2 articles before he got the Biden nod, but that's where he was at. He was out there asking people for work. He came and asked CoinDesk to publish his stuff, and it was garbage, obviously garbage, right? Now they did because MIT and blah, blah, blah. But, across the market, and whenever people ask me about events, how big can these events get? Because remember, the event we just did in Amsterdam, for example, the production value was absolutely through the roof. And the talent and the people that put the event on, I just mean the lighting and all that stuff, absolutely next level. These aren't like typical trade shows anymore. These aren't typical employee driven management conventions and all those kinds of things. They're much larger. I always say that I'm trying to condense the entire college experience of a year into 4 days, where you have the funds, you have all of that stuff happening at once, right? So the idea that events are already that Bitcoin events are already filling the void of universities is clear. But the idea that universities are no longer trustworthy for anything is becoming more and more obvious. We talk about all the Mockingbird stuff here. We talk about how information laundering works and the trusted third parties that are used in order to launder information, the same way Satoshi warned us that trusted third parties were how the financial system was using how the financial system was laundering money as a structural goal, right? So this idea of non-trustable third parties and the universities being captured as part of the information laundering system seemed insane 7 or 8 years ago when Trump was getting started, when Sargon of Akkad was first booted off of the internet, right? So the progress we've made has been great, but this past week might have finally sunk universities altogether. I mean, altogether. The disgust Canadians have with York University, the disgust Canadians have with most of our institutions is only growing, right? It's only growing. And what happened in the United States seemed much, much more relevant. We saw all kinds of people saying, I'll never hire these people ever. Give me a list of everyone who signed that letter. They're never getting a job. So we spoke for many times. I've predicted for a long time that the job conduit from college, having these colleges on your resume, was already worth nothing in the Bitcoin industry. It's going to be worth way less. Now, if you're 40 years old and you went to Harvard, or even 35, I'll give you a lot of respect, honestly. Like, it was hard to get in back then, right? I remember in my day, it wasn't like an amazing feat to have been accepted, right? But now you look at the presidents of Harvard. I don't want to assume their pronouns, right? I don't want to assume their pronouns. I don't know what's even going on there. Go check out the president of Harvard these days. It's not Larry Summers. I worked for a company that had Larry Summers on the board, right? So I've spent time with the fella. I know I've met Harvard presidents before. Say what you want about Larry Summers. He's smart, right? Now, I loved watching him get dragged through the mud the past week on Twitter. It was hilarious, right? How did this happen? And everyone said, well, Larry, we told you, right? And he's like, how could this have happened, right? And everyone's saying, well, Larry, you had a lot to do with it, right? And I think he did. And watching him and his brain break in real time as he tries to look at the horror that he's created is probably a great thing, right? So in the same way that we can't tell good news from bad, what happened this week is probably the end of colleges. Like they can't be mobilized in the same way they did. They can't be used in the information laundering system. We spent, and Mike Ben Cyber, for example, spent how many tweets, how many conversations, how many essays, how many videos, how often have we talked about the corruption of universities? This week did more to prove their failure than anything we've ever seen, and I don't think they can recover. So again, in order to mobilize us to war, right? In order to mobilize us to war, you need the information laundering system humming. It's got to work. It's got to make connections. It's got to find a way to persuade people. And without that element to it, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So that's one huge piece just taken off the board, right? Political parties, in some ways, I think, are also victim here, right? So it used to be you'd kind of have to explain to people what uniparty was, right? Well, there's some people in this party and there's some people in that party, and they all seem to like war, and they might disagree when it comes to sex and churches and holidays and shit like that, right? One might get angry about a Starbucks latte, and the other one might get angry about, a war on Christmas or tampons in the men's bathroom, right? All of these things. So those things can get a little bit of division in the political party, right? But they always seem to come together whenever there was some money to be made with bombs, right? That seemed to be a little suspicious. Now, you had to go out of your way to explain this to people before, and you had to push through them, are you sure? All of their doubts and all that stuff. Now it's obvious. You don't really need to prove it too much more, right? When people see this stuff and people see these changing trends, it becomes a lot easier to tell the story, a lot easier to show that this is happening, right? Now, Yeah, and the Ivy League, and the president of Harvard, whoever they are, right? I don't want to assume they's gender. They even said that now they're not they're a place, they're a bastion, they're a place for free speech. That's what they say. They got the lowest ranking apparently in the history of colleges on free speech, and this is what they're going for, right? So they they continue to say that it's a great place, but we know it isn't, right? So political parties now, just like colleges, like political parties used to be kind of a place to go and have other folks on your team, right? And you didn't have to confront cognitive dissonance. Yeah, you were able to say on either team, I'm not, this is a Republican and Democrat thing, right? You were able to go say, oh, look at all those stupid brainwashed people over there. They're so dumb. Those people are just the stupidest. And then each group could say that, and they would be sort of happy by having their confirmations, their biases confirmed when they're with their own cohort and things like that. So that allowed this thing to perpetuate for quite a while. But this Israel thing upends that again, right? So the political parties, the binaries that they've occupied for a long time, were completely mixed this week. And the truth is the MAGA anti-war coalition, let's call it, emerged from out of this fighting, right? And took the opportunity to ask these difficult questions and do things like that, right? So then there's the other story of Trump getting the gag order this week, right? So you've got universities falling apart. You've got political parties, zero credibility, zero, right? Political parties, nothing. Mainstream media, nothing. Academia, nothing, right? The legal system, you've got Trump with this is even good. One more point on the political parties before I move on to the legal system and Trump's gag order from today. So this is from Forbes, and we know Forbes isn't real news, right? Everyone knows that. Forbes, just like Bloomberg, is fake, right? Completely fake. Like when I say completely fake, I mean 100% fake. Right? Not like they have fake articles and then there's people working there. Just they don't have a worldview that lines up with anywhere we're going, right? It's all just garbage. So here's what they're saying, right? That House Democrat lawmaker has floated making George W. Bush the speaker. So a Democrat, okay, is talking about what a great idea it would be to have George Bush speaker. Wasn't he the most hated man in the history of Democrat politics just a couple years ago? Wasn't he a Nazi just a little while ago? Wasn't I told he was the worst thing ever? And he was not great. So I'm not here defending him, right? But how can you not realize that the Uniparty is a major thing in America when you hear this? Like suddenly, what did he do? Because he got hugged from Michelle Obama, all is forgiven? Like he's just cool now, right? So, but it shows just how quickly the brainwashing can be torn down, built up, right? These are buttons you push. It's just buttons. You push a button and you get your result. And that's what we see, right? So here he is. Here they are asking for George Bush now to be the president. If this doesn't prove to you that there's a uniparty, I don't know what else would. George Bush, a Democrat speaker. Now, of course, he would wear a fake Republican hat, but it would be the Uniparty, right? And Mike Benz has been saying for a long time that the Cowboy Coalition, the Houston Cowboy faction that has its unipartyist connections to the Yankee Wall Street aspect, seems to go back all the way to the Kennedy times, right? It seems to go back to when his father, George Bush Sr., was heavily involved in all this stuff as a diplomatic envoy. Do you guys all know the history of George Bush, right? So probably around Dealey Plaza in '63, probably. That's what a lot of people say. But what comes next is the important stuff, right? So what comes next is he moves on to become the UN ambassador to American ambassador to the UN. So he moves to New York City. And he's in that disgustingly ugly building, and I don't understand why people think it's beautiful, the UN building in New York. So he's in that stupid building in New York City where the UN is. That was just a few blocks from my office. I was on the same street as well. I used to walk to it on the canal and walk back when I'd want to do when I'd go for my silent walking, when I was way ahead of the Gen Zers and inventing a whole brand new way of walking without a phone. I was so busy innovating back then, right? It wasn't just Bitcoin that I was innovating on, right? I was innovating as well with walking by leaving my phone. And I would walk to the East River and I'd walk back. And every time I'd look at that filthy, disgusting building rotting there, just sweating, disgusting, gross shit out of its concrete, right? Just an ugly shithole. And so well, I said I wouldn't swear with kids watching around. And here I am talking about shitholes. Sorry about that, guys. So I would walk to that building and walk back, right? Apparently, George Bush made a huge portion of his career just walking the hallways in that building, right? That ambassador. Apparently, he was like next door to the Saudis. That's where a lot of the stuff got cooked up, I'm told, right? So then he gets himself involved in the takedown of Nixon. He's the president of the party at the time, right? So he's the president of the Republican Party. So he goes and takes care of that stuff. And once Nixon is out, he becomes the head of the CIA. And while he's the head of the CIA, he gets firmly implanted as vice presidential candidate. And then we go on a period where we call it the Obushtians, where there was either a Clinton or a Bush on every single ballot, every single presidential ballot in America from 1980 until 2016. All right, do the math. You get Bush Senior, vice president in 80, so he's on the ticket. 84, he's on the ticket. 88, he's the president. He's on the ticket in 92 against Clinton. Clinton takes over. He's on the ticket in 96. In 2000, you get the Bush son, right? So 2000, he's on the board. In 2000, 2004, he's on the board, right? On the board as in he's on the ticket because he wins. 2008, Hillary does run, right? She runs for president, so you got a Clinton back there again. But Obama, of course, wins and doesn't look like he's separate from this entity at all. Looks like he's 2 feet first inside of this entity. 2012, of course, you get Obama again. And then 2016, you get Clinton again. So it's either Bush's or Clinton's from 1980 until 2016. I mean, that's 36 years of two families. 36 years of two families in a country as big as America. 36 years, 7 elections, 8, 80, 84, 88, 92, 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012. No, 10 elections. Is that even possible? 10 elections. Yeah, 10 US elections. We have the same people. There's only been, 40-something elections in the whole history of the United States. And they got 10? It's like 1/5, right? 1/5 of all US history is dominated by two families recently. So that they're even talking about this, I think, proves what we all can see now very clearly in front of us. The Uniparty is a real thing. It's been operating for a long time. And again, why Trump has always been a major problem for this thing. And that's why he has to have his mouth shut, right? So that's why he has to have his mouth shut. So you get, one more political party thing. So now that all of this uniparty stuff is coming out, it seems like there's a huge civil war within the Republican Party itself around the Israel question. NBC now and PC News partnering with the Republicans to be the host of the debate in just a few weeks, right? So Malling Hemingway saying here, NBC, which ran the Russia collusion scam, the Kavanaugh rape scam, hid news about the Biden family business, and constantly runs anti-GOP propaganda, is rewarded by the RNC with a debate. Why not, right? And they're going to be doing it in Miami. Why not? Yeah, just do it. Just go ahead, right? So the good news, the good news here is that universities are now not just mistrusted, loathed. Political parties, not just mistrusted, loathed, right? Now the legal system, let's move on to Trump, right? So Trump gets gagged yesterday. Now, let's try to remember. I haven't tested myself in a while. All right. I'm going to try and remember all of Trump's arrests, the reasons for them, and a little bit about some of the main players, right? So I remember Jack Smith. That's Georgia. Okay. Now there's also the Letitia James money thing with the Trump bill, the Mar-a-Lago assessments, right? That's for the financially illiterate people. Oops. That's for the financially illiterate to get angry about. what was the one? They had one more. Oh yeah, the rape, the rape one in New York, the Carol one, right? Where he got in trouble. It's not the rape, obviously. We all remember that. He got in trouble for what was it again? Calling her a liar after it was already proven that she lied, and that was the defamation. I think that was it, right? No. Okay. So what we are dealing with here, by I think just the only reason I'm able to remember is because this is like elimination, right? It's the boxes hoax, right? So this is the Mar-a-Lago boxes hoax, not the Mar-a-Lago valuation. This is the Mar-a-Lago boxes hoax. So the boxes hoax, right? I think is the one where he was moving them, and then who was supposed to move them, and someone said you can't move them, but he did, and then another person said you can, but you can't. So, boom, jail, right? And here's the great news. So, first of all, the judge herself, right, has shown just absolutely no ability to be blind in this case, right? This is not a justice is blind case. And so here's what Kyle Becker says. It says, Judge Tanya Chutkan, a radical activist judge who has made partisan statements against Donald Trump and his supporters in the past, didn't just issue a narrow gag order against him today. The judge issued it against tens of millions of Trump supporters who are seeking justice and accountability in the federal government. So I guess it's something about like he's not allowed to spread misinformation, and no one else is as well, about the 2020 election. So that's the whole thing here, is the 2020 election, which, even though I'm telling you about all the things that are broken and scammy, right? That the media is broken, that that political parties are broken, especially on the election question, right? Never forget the Republicans do this too, right? That's why there's no solution. It's the unipartyist nature. They're not trying to protect Democrats. They're trying to protect themselves, right? So don't. It's not like, oh, we're going to screw Americans. It's more like, I'm going to protect myself, and that's why the Republicans don't want this election thing to ever even be talked about or changed. They have different ways of cheating, and they want to make sure each person's way of cheating gets remains, right? So here's the gag orders against everyone. She issued against a former president who is running against the sitting president of the United States. She issued against democratic norms, which prohibits weaponized justice departments from engaging in election interference. Judge Chutkan laughed repeatedly while mocking Trump and his legal team for objecting to her condemnation of political speech, such as his protestations against the Biden Department of Justice. So she was sitting there saying, you think the Department of Justice is corrupt? She railed against his attempts to call out for actual justice and equal treatment under the law, then casually dismissed his sensible request for a trial after the 2024 election. The entire premise of the January 6th case is based on political narrative set by his opponents and not any actual standard of justice. His language imploring supporters to fight like hell for justice is ubiquitous in American politics. He explicitly called for protesters to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. There is nothing criminal about objecting to elections. Trump sought legal recourse and only legal recourse repeatedly, and there is no credible evidence to suggest otherwise. America can be measured by how it treats each and every one of us under the law. If there is no justice in any individual case, there is no justice anywhere. Donald Trump is not a threat to democracy. His prosecutors are the real threat to democracy. And here's what he says. It's so hard to drill this into people's heads. It doesn't matter if you like Donald Trump. It doesn't matter if you like his politics. It doesn't matter if you like his style. You don't subvert institutions like the rule of law to destroy one man. You don't undermine due process by targeting a man and fabricating cases to allege crimes against him. You don't interfere in elections to stop one man. You are attacking the idea of America itself when you adhere to such a warped concept of justice, that the ends justify the means, right? So they did it. They've gagged him, right? Which is probably one of the funniest things we're ever going to see. Watching anyone on this planet attempt to gag Donald Trump, it's going to lead him to jail, I think, which will even be funnier. Trump from jail is going to be one of the funniest things you've ever seen. I mean, did anyone see his statement this morning that the so Judge Chutkan, he called her a monkey. They called her a monkey, right? Now, of course, he's racist. Everyone going on that he's racist, right? But that's Trump doing it. Trump getting everyone to pay attention, and now everyone is paying attention. So here we are left with a situation where you've got everyone freaking out. You've got everyone mad at Trump again on one side, everyone thinking the whole system's been thrown out in order to screw Trump over, right? And when Kyle Becker says here that it's so hard to drill it into people's heads that it doesn't matter if you like Trump. Well, it used to be so hard. It used to be so hard. But look at the advantage that we get now that it's happening, right? If you take a look at Chamath Palihapitiya, right? Chamath, who I've booked for shows before. I was supposed to interview him a couple of years ago, but he bailed again, right? He's a big bailer on interviews. I had him booked in 2017 as well. It didn't work out. I'm sure I'll interview him at some point. So now here he is, right? And he's doing, and this is one of the big differences that we have in 2024, even compared to 2020 or 2016. In 2024, you still had, in 2020, you really only had people like Sargon of Akkad and Stefan Molyneux's. 2020 less, Stefan, of course, he's been sort of forgotten because of the ban. But the point is, you only had a few people getting their sources of information from outside the mainstream media. The mainstream media is in total collapse in the past few years. COVID pretty much destroyed any trust people had in them. You got Pfizer coming out admitting today in their documents that in one of their warnings that the vaccine, of course, causes myocarditis, right? So Pfizer is even saying it now. So you don't have to look much further than Pfizer's own warnings on the vaccine now. And imagine, in their own warnings, they say that it affects young men worse, yet they still have colleges that are saying you must take it. So of all the things that could happen to colleges, besides the Hamas thing, forcing people to get the vaccine still to this day should be all we need to destroy it forever, right? I can't see them making it anymore, which takes apart the entire information laundering system, which is great news. It's just great news, right? So the mind virus, which existed for a long time around Trump, required a complete full court press. You know, if some of you aren't American basketball players out there, a full court press is when the whole team rushes one side of the basketball court to make sure the ball can't leave that part, so that whatever they do, they get control of the ball. You do a full court press as a surprise attack, or in instances where you don't have much time and you've got to really make sure the ball is in play, or you want to kill time, one or the other, right? So full court press here was what was needed to deal with Trump before. And it mostly worked because the Sargon of Akkad and all these other types could be pushed out, right? But now that you get a guy like Chamath and Jason Calacanis, right? So these are two, if you don't know who they are, they're the All In podcast with David Sachs. The whole thing started off as like politically different people arguing about stuff, because David Sachs, of course, has been a Trump supporter for a while. But both Chamath and Calacanis were loud Joe Biden supporters, loud Hillary supporters, like huge, right? Now, what they've learned in the past couple of years doing their own podcast and their own successful podcast, which I think is actually one of the best podcasts out there, you've actually been able to model and show someone like Chamath Palihapitiya and Jason Calacanis completely changing their point of view, having their own personal awakenings. There's nothing more powerful. You know, at the show in Amsterdam, I went after Ava of Larningerbroek very, very hard. I went after getting her at the show because, and people would say, well, why do you want, she's a populist, and what does she have to say about Bitcoin? People who didn't understand what's going on would say, why do you want someone who doesn't understand about Bitcoin? I say, because this is always the most valuable thing I can do, right? When I program these shows, is showing people, modeling them getting orange pilled live, right? There's nothing more powerful than modeling someone who has a bunch of ideas. They come into the space and then it brings all their ideas together, right? So she, from now on, I think is going to be a very powerful Bitcoiner with a very powerful voice in our favor. And this will redirect most of her efforts into what will be more efficient way of delivering her message. So just like we did with Ava of Larningerbroek in Holland last week in Amsterdam, Chamath Palihapitiya and Jason Calacanis modeling for the whole world, modeling for all these know-it-all Silicon Valley people who listen to their podcast, that the Trump thing is changed them, right? So here's what he said. He says, Chamath, right? Chamath highlights President Trump's remarkable Middle East peace achievement via the Abraham Accords, underscores the growing need for a U.S. border wall, and points out the corporate media's lies about Jared Kushner. As a Democrat, this is Chamath, right, who has been left homeless, who is now definitely in the center, but probably leaning increasingly right, I'm left yet again with an appreciation, despite the messenger of the message of the Trump administration, because what those guys did was pretty incredible. In hindsight, these Abraham Accords, the accords with Israel and the GCC, the almost accord between Israel and Saudi, to really be able to find a long-lasting peace. He's just a real example of the world. And those guys did a lot of really great work. And Jason Calacanis says it's a miracle when you look at it. Listen, I'm no fan of Trump, but if you objectively look at what he did, it was great work. Chamath asks if Trump derangement syndrome is causing more damage than President Trump, and with the left and the media's bias against the messenger overshadowing the importance of the message. I think the answer is yes, he says. So much of the work that happened in that administration turned out to have been right. The work on the border wall, we didn't need them. We didn't like the messenger, so we killed the message. Turned out it was right. Issuing long-term debt to refinance when rates were at zero, we didn't like the messenger, so we killed the message. A structural peace deal in the Middle East, we didn't like the message, so we killed the messenger. So he goes on and on here, right, about where we're at, right? He goes, and why did we spend years being fed all of these stupid lies? Because one can judge for oneself, but Jared Kushner is thoughtful. He's smart, and I thought to myself, I was fed all these lies for years about this guy who was mopping around in the shadows, this and that, and it was all not true, right? So remember, and even the thing they're going on Jared Kushner right now, right? Remember that they're trying to compare Jared Kushner to Hunter Biden, right? Because sons, right? So think about it like this. There is no product in the Hunter Biden crime family situation, right? The whole Biden crime family thing, there's no product. It's just shell companies and access and exactly what it looks like, right? Now imagine, and it's all hidden, and it's only from looking into bank proceedings and the laptop from hell that we know any of this stuff. Now, Jared Kushner did a press release. He did a press release when he talked about the money he got from Saudi, right? A press release, because that's what fund management is. Fund management is mega transparent. You think someone gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner to go a party or something? He's got to get a return on the investment. They gave him 2 and 20 for sure. They gave him 2 and 20, right? If you guys don't know what 2 and 20 is, it's the typical money management system, right? 2% management fees for the year. If you give someone $2 billion, you owe them 2% of that per year to manage the money. And then you also have to pay them 20% of the earnings. But that's the standard Wall Street contract. The 2 and 20 system is what makes the whole hedge fund world go round, right? Everyone does 2 and 20. 2 and 20 was slightly threatened at the time of the great financial crisis, but came right back. The whole reaction to the 2008 financial crisis was to ensure 2 and 20 persisted, right? So 2 and 20 has been around forever. It might go somewhere. We're going to talk about that in a second. But 2 and 20 is foundational, right? And so the reason why you have to be public about a lot of this stuff, and why Kushner was public about a lot of this stuff, is he got the 2 and 20, right? But so what? It's still their money, and it was entirely transparent. So the idea, and people like Chamath know this, right? When they see the low IQ fake news going, well, Jared Kushner is the same as Hunter Biden, anyone who is financially literate in the least bit knows they're not even close to the same. The only thing that's the same is we're dealing with sons or sons-in-law. That's it. And when aren't we dealing with that? Aren't we all someone's son? You could make that comparison to anything, right? But running a money laundering outfit is not the same as an investment scheme. And who else would, like, the business that Kushner is in is New York real estate. Well, if you're a Saudi trillionaire, which the royal family is, if you pile it all in, you know how hard it is to find like investment opportunities for them. It's not easy, right? Hey, there's Jared Kushner. I'll give him some money, right? Normal, very transparent. Nothing wrong with it. Now, the effect that this has on people like that is it changes their minds about what's going on. It changes their minds. To someone who is illiterate, like Chamath, that can see it for what it is, it's a devastating loss. And now, because the mainstream media is so weak, having other podcasts like the All In Podcast will totally change the deal in 2024. It's a different world when you get the smartest people in Silicon Valley talking this way. It's not the same planet. And we get even more, right? Because I don't know if you guys saw, but Mark Andreessen published a piece yesterday called Techno-Optimism, the Techno-Optimist Manifesto. It's a pretty interesting read, but these are the important parts, right? He says there are only three sources of growth, right? Population growth, natural resource utilization, and technology. So he's going through the reasons that he's a techno-optimist, right? And he's saying this is the only way we can have growth, and we must have growth, right? And then he says, so these are the ways, and then he says, but it's not. We've got to focus on technology because we're not going to grow our population. Natural resources have a cost benefit that will persist and is just reality. It's only technology. So he says, couple technology with this understanding of markets and how people are functioning within markets. So technology within markets. He gives the famous Adam Smith quote, which I used when I first wrote my market interest paper on Bitcoin, which was something we used in the early days at CoinDesk. Basically, we measured every other blockchain by Bitcoin, right? So it was just a way to measure percentage hash rate, basically a way to measure interest in a different sense. And I called it market interest for that reason. So instead of market cap, right, I was trying to create a data tool that wasn't market cap. What it was you take all these data points, 50 different data points, number of users, number of exchanges that listed, number of trade pairs, volume, social media chatter online, number of developers putting activity on the GitHub. So I had 50 like really interesting data points that came in. And what we did was, and we did it for all kinds of other blockchains as well. So what we ended up doing was, instead of coming up with a score, right, of this, we measured other ones by Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the perfect version. So no matter what Bitcoin was 100%. Bitcoin was always 100% perfect. And every other network was measured by Bitcoin. And I called it market interest instead of market cap because that's what we're talking about. In a crypto economic system, literally the interest of people to contribute to a decentralized thing with no boss or whatever is the important thing. The amount of interest people have is how the network is actually engineered and grows. So I did it that way because I would say to everyone, and I still say it to people in the Bitcoin space, whether you like it or not, right? Whether you like it or not, the first industry that made their savings and put Bitcoin on the balance sheet was the crypto industry, right? The crypto industry, which I'll always, I wrote the book on them being separated, right? You never have to, and Larry Fink, of course, even knows it now. Larry Fink separated them in his mind in an interview yesterday. Crypto and Bitcoin are totally different things. But the truth is, crypto still used Bitcoin before anyone else, right? So whether people like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's what happened. And that's why I measured crypto by Bitcoin, right? Which is what you should continue to do. Now, I don't, Bitcoin, crypto is as interesting to me as baseball cards or some other hobby, which I like hobbies. So I'm interested in all that stuff, but it's not a worldview system. It's not like Bitcoin. You can't actually understand world wars and spiritual change using crypto. You can only do that with Bitcoin. But you can also understand crypto with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the way to measure crypto. And so this was the quote that I first used. This is about interest, right? And it's from Adam Smith. And he says, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their own regard to their own self-interest," right? That's why I used interest. "We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages." So when you sell something to someone, it's not because, oh, it'll help me, right? That's the victim thing, or I need help or whatever. It's more like, hey, this will be good for you, right? A better sales pitch, right? We've all understood that for a long time. David Friedman points out that people only do things for other people for three reasons, right? And I believe this entirely. It's either love, force, or money, right? And this is the important part. He goes, love doesn't scale, so the economy can only run on money or force. The force experiment has been around for a long time, right? So let's just stick with money, right? That's what he says. Let's stick with money. And indeed, if you stick with money and you chase down how that could actually affect all of these incentives and the way we organize ourselves, you realize right away that rich people, right? The rich people are not going to be playing the game that we've seen until now. They're not going to stay on the Chamath plan from 2020, 2016. They're not going to stay on the Andreessen plan from 2016 and 2020. They're going to do what BlackRock's talking about, right? And this is what BlackRock's talking about. BlackRock came around yesterday, and with the ETF rumor and the markets going crazy, it came around and said, what you're seeing with this rumor is a flight to quality, a flight to quality. Now, for many years, Ray Dalio and these other rich folks didn't want to bet against America. They didn't want to bet against the dollar. They didn't want to bet against the system because there was probably no other way, right? They still weren't completely sure it was corrupted. They still weren't completely sure it was garbage, right? But now that we see over time, right? Now that we see that the 2020 election, right? Now that we see J6, now that we see the parents being domestic terrorists, right? And the FBI thing, the southern border, right? All of Trump getting arrested, right? The roll up of money around Ukraine and Gaza now, COVID-19, the Hunter Biden laptop, right? Ukraine, Russia, that whole thing, right? The white supremacy is the greatest threat to America. The mostly peaceful riots of 2020. All of these things, right? All of these things together mean that enough of the rich people like Larry Fink and even take Bill Gates. You know what Bill Gates said last week? Bill Gates said last week that global warming is not an existential threat. How do they come back from that? How, right? And then ask yourself, right? Bill Gates probably getting blackmailed, probably not speaking his own mind regularly, right? Probably doing, like the Jeff Bezos thing. Why we know the Washington Post loses $100 million a year. You think Jeff Bezos woke up one day and was like, hey, I got a great idea. Even though I have built the most amazing company in the world, even though I have the greatest software company that ever lived, and Amazon is an amazing product. And, I use it, right? There's probably no better product. I do believe they sell the information to the, exactly what Muslim Bitcoiner is saying here. I do think they know what you read, and I do think they get your Amazon lists if you're a person of interest, right? Speaking of interest, if you're a person of interest, I think that Amazon probably has no problem giving them your wish list, which is probably the most valuable brainwashing persuasive tool out there for the people who would do this to you. Right? You think Jeff Bezos woke up one day and was like, I have a great idea. I'm going to get into the newspaper business and lose $100 million a year, right? You think he woke up and did that? You think a person who has, like I said, how many shitty software companies are out there, right? They're all shitty. What app on your fucking phone works? Nothing. It's all garbage. Except Amazon. They're the best, right? That thing that he has is addictive. You get everything you want. The prices are great. The reviews, everything about the product is amazing. Everything, right? Like it or not, everything about Amazon is an amazing product. You can not use it if you'd like, and I would respect that. That's not a problem. If you want to go to your own local candle maker to buy shit, go for it, right? It's still the best product on the market. You think someone that smart is like, I got a great idea, I'm going to go into this old shitty business called newspapers. It's not only a shitty business. It's a whole industry that's disreputable after the internet came around and all the trouble they've caused, right? And then it's the lowest on the rung of the disreputable industry, right? So the news is already disreputable, and it's the lowest form of the news. Newspapers. It loses $100 million a year, the Washington Post. Do you think Jeff Bezos is like, yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lose $100 million a year on a dumb idea? Of course not. Right? So him, Bill Gates, right? These people don't know, but here's what Bill Gates said, right? He says, not an existential threat, global warming. You got to wonder at a certain point if all of these people are sitting there and saying, is my ego and me going down in the history books as not whatever it is they're lording over their head and blackmailing them with, right? Is that worth an existential threat to society? Because that's what it's become, right? Because we can tie all of this in now to the fiat system, which is propagated by propaganda, right? All of this, everything we see wrong with us in the world today is from the fake news. The fake news allowed all of this to happen, and it is the reason it even happened. If we didn't have Moscow time fake news, we would not have any of these troubles. I don't think any of them. I think they're all conjured, every single one of them. And there was a time 4 years ago where you could have said, there's some fake news, but there's some real stuff there too. And if we just keep working hard, we can get the fake stuff out and the good stuff will win. Now what I see is people like Chamath, people like Jason Kalkanis, people like PM Mark Andreessen, even Bill Gates, coming out and saying things that are disrupting the narrative and that are helpful. And you can think that, does someone like Bill Gates want his legacy to be, oh, I had to hide my crimes, so I let the whole world be destroyed so there aren't even history books? Because that's where it's at. The fake news went from being a little bit annoying, right? Like it was just an annoying thing, to being an existential threat. Because we're not going to make it out of this. We're not. If we don't destroy the fake news, we're not going to make it out of this. Now, when I say destroy the fake news, go back to money. The fake news fiat is the words that come out of the fake news. It's all built from that. The money are the words. The code of the dollar are the words that come out of the nodes that are the MSNPC system. It's all of these node propagators that are the fake news. The Washington Post is a master node. The New York Times is a master node. And so these master nodes are perpetuating a system, which is exactly what it says it is. Words. It's word money, right? And so the word money gets propagated by the fake news. And the good news is they are completely disreputable at this point. And everyone knows it. And I don't think the rich people are going to keep playing along. And I don't think BlackRock's going to keep playing along. So when you hear him say the truth yesterday, which is this is a flight to quality, right? Which is what he said. He said that it is a flight to quality. What you're going to see is the people betting against the fiat node system. They don't want this shit, right? They've seen it go on for too long now. It is very clear what we see, right? We see that since 9/11, right? America's war on terror has just made an incredible price tag for America, and we can't even get the benefits from it anymore. And exactly what we heard earlier from Sargon of Akkad, we're weak at home, we're weak abroad, right? There's only one thing left. We got to see the destruction of this thing through and go to the creative phase. The creative phase is a lot more fun, right? And now Sargon might be right. There might be more bloodshed and death. But I think we are so close now. I think we are so close to starting something completely new in America, and states' rights and other natural and inherent benefits that America still enjoys, like the Second Amendment, will allow us to get there. So the good news is we're going to win, and it's coming close. All right, let's see what we got. Unusual whales. Unusual whales showing people from both parties buying defense stocks. Yeah. Australia had its Brexit type moment over the weekend. We rejected the political class's woke referendum to change the constitution to install a race-based lobby group. Wow, that would be the worst. That would be really bad. The US is on a cliff's edge. It sure is. How dare you? Forbes is just as good as the New York Times. I'd pay to see another. I heard they interviewed the shoe thrower the other day. He was still all happy about it. I'll never forget his face. Remember when whoa. Trump would have thrown it back at him. That's what you got to love about Trump, right? He wouldn't have been like, "Oh, I'm offended." Can you imagine throwing a shoe at Trump? I want to see that. Thankful that Hillary never won, at least. God, am I thankful. I mean, I used to sit there in 2017 as the market was going wild with my Bitcoin friends, and I'd say, like, imagine Hillary won. Imagine. I did the opposite of Canadians. I moved to America when Trump won. I don't know where I was going to go if Hillary won. Don't know. Trump did screw it all up for them. Trump. No, there has to be a game show. A legal infograph won't help. It's too complicated. You need like a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it's just Trump legal edition. Trump should sell it to Marlboro to cover legal fees. Yeah. He should sell. You know what he should do is he should sell the naming rights to anyone for exactly what they said it's worth, and then put that in addition. That would be funny. Vote for peace and justice, buy Bitcoin. Yeah, planet size gag. Yeah, the whole world is gagged under Trump. It's gonna be great. It's hard for me to laugh at the end of the rule of law. It's all the West Side going for it. Yeah, it's done. Running out of tears. Yeah. How did you like 4 players ejected for kneeling? I didn't see that, Dan. I'll have to go check. I believe it was Houston players. Okay, I'll check it out. Neither am I understanding Bitcoin, but again, I do believe in their self-interest. So go back to that's why I read the Adam Smith quote, right? That it's not from the butcher's benevolence or the baker's goodwill, right? It's their self-interest. Do I expect Chamath to not want to die as a poor pauper? Yeah, I do. Like I fully expect Jason Calacanis to try to preserve his wealth, just like I fully expect BlackRock to preserve its wealth. And that means at this point betting against the United States, which is what we need to happen, right? As we said at the beginning of the show, World War III is about people against their people versus their countries. I want the rich people on my team. I don't know about you guys, but I'm all for the rich people on my team. I don't want to be against the rich people, right? Now, I'll do it if I have to, and I've been doing it for years, but I'd rather they were on my team. And I say that with a bitter anger towards BlackRock. They've robbed me personally. But a lot of money, right? I blame all the lawfare being propagated against Kraken as entirely 100% them. So that's the valuation of Kraken. I owned a bunch of Kraken shitcoin because I worked there, right? And it was not liquid and I couldn't trade it for Bitcoin. So I never even margin traded shit, and I got robbed in this market downturn, just absolutely robbed. DCG, right? Gone, right? It was worth, there was 50 employees and I was one of them, and it was worth $10 billion. Gone. It's gone. It's worth nothing. Dog shit. Again, same problem. I blame all these fuckers for it. Now, I don't care. I didn't really take it seriously because it wasn't Bitcoin and I didn't get to put it into Bitcoin. It's just more proof that all I have left is the Bitcoin and all of that stuff, right? So I do not like these people. They're not my friends, right? I'm not cheering for them because they robbed me on the way up, right? They robbed. I consider it absolute robbing, and I won't see it any other way for my entire life. Now, does that mean I'm against? Like, I would love for BlackRock to sponsor something at Bitcoin Magazine on one of our shows and all that stuff, right? Because it's in my self-interest. I'm not going to get all angry about what they did and this and that, right? I fucking hate them. Right? They robbed from me and my children. So not my friends, right? But you can't get angry. That's the trick, by the way. The trick to making this Bitcoin revolution work is you can't get angry. You just can't get angry about it. If you get angry about it, you're going to have way more trouble. So I'm going to work to take BlackRock's sponsorship money. It'll be a far less significant number for me personally than what they robbed me for, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to get it from them, right? You'll see them sponsor our event. You will see it. Now, they're dirtbags, but I'm betting on them being dirtbags. Like, that's what I want them to be. I don't want them to be anything else but the dirtbags we know them to be. And if they're willing to do it to as many people as they've done it, I think they'll do it to the government just as easily. So that's what we want, right? So I don't believe that they're genuine. I don't need to believe that they're genuine. I don't think they're out there playing me and lying. So now I don't trust them, right? But what I mean to say is that there is even this counter voice and counter narrative, and that it's not just mainstream media, puts us in a very different position in 2024 than we were in previous market cycles. So, but don't trust them. Yeah. They're not to be trusted. Trust them to work in their own self-interest. That's it. And that's all I'm saying they're doing, right? Aren't changing their tune, though. They don't matter again. Look, the NPC coefficient here is not that important. I go back to the conquistadors' argument that our weapons in World War III are psychological, and we have we've got an iron dome around us, right? It's psychic iron dome as Bitcoiners. So, and we've got weapons much more powerful, and so that's the difference. In World War III, which is a psychological and economic war, they are fodder, and what are you going to do? They're exactly what they are in the games, like. Right. You pass yourself off as cynical, but you will still have some faith in the system, don't you? Yeah, they do. They probably do. Ice money from Cover the Sun, yeah. Think still can't make the distinction clear between Bitcoin and crypto crap. Coinbase needs to be replaced with a true Bitcoin spot market maker that isn't trying to propagate token scams on ETH. All retail Bitcoin buyers are poorly treated by the market. It's not just Coinbase. You need so one thing I learned when I worked at Kraken was that most retail is just serving up they're not at the tip of price discovery. There are very few price discovery venues that are retail, and probably won't be for a while, unfortunately. You can still get better spreads on buying IBM stock, for example, than Bitcoin. So not good. But it will get better. It will get better. There's a video of Hillary calling Bitcoin to the dollar as the world reserve. What I've seen from that is Hillary's famous Thanksgiving address from 2 years ago, when she says it can destroy nation states. I don't remember exactly the quote you're talking about. Bitcoin needs people willing to be self-interested, but also rational. Otherwise, you get a version 2.0 of SBF and Meyer crypto. Hold on, understand Bitcoin. Here's one part you're misunderstanding, or maybe I'm wrong. So maybe it's not a misunderstanding. We've already been living through generational financial crimes, right? And I still think that our job is to turn all of the fiat into Bitcoin, of course. But if it goes through a crypto scam, I don't care. Like, I don't care, right? If anyone out there is selling ETH to some BlackRock pension, whatever, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Because eventually you will come to Bitcoin. So the natural progress is generally this line, this way. So I still believe Ethereum and all these things have to be much bigger scams, much bigger. They've got to get so big that they take down all of Wall Street. Because what I really want is for the best and brightest to stop going into financial engineering, which will happen. And how do we do that? Well, it has to be so embarrassing that they don't want it anymore. How do you make Wall Street embarrassing? Right now, it's not embarrassing. They get paid for their fake financial engineering, right? Well, what you do is you turn the financial engineering into exactly what it is, just masturbation. It's just porn, right? You turn them into a bunch of whack-off porn, fake risk lovers that think their own world is everything. What you got to do is you got to go look at remember the wizards when they came to Bitcoin 2023, Udi and Eric, right? Nice enough guys, right? You guys aren't solving any problems at your event. Problems, L1 scaling, L2 scaling, right? No. We're only solving global warming, peace on Earth, and those other things, right? So the people who think that the tech theater and all that is the big draw, scaling and the engineering stuff, right? That's consumer tech being launched on top of that, right? Yeah, exactly. There you go. There, Chevy's got it. I want the Rothschilds to buy bags and bags and bags and bags of ETH and Doge and XRP, all of it. Just get it all. Pile up, fill your bags, boys. We're going to have a great time, right? So it just won't persist. Crypto will die when Wall Street dies. And there's never been a better Bitcoin onboarding tool than getting ETH scammed. So look, if I can take down the whole thing, I would. Right? If the scenario for the next market is we pump all the shit coins up, and I want to see more of these like boomers talking about. I love the boomer videos when they'd be like, "So I'm now I've got a collateralized loan in Uniswap, and I'm gonna get some yield coins over. I'm gonna yield farm over there," and then it was the best. It was hilarious. So let them have it. They got to have it all. The morality here of Bitcoiners being like virtuous. I'm glad we have those people. I'm glad. Keep them there, right? Let them show the way. That's all great. But it's not really how we're going to get there, right? So the way we're going to get there is when they start talking about ETH, you just make up another coin scam that's even better. Well, did you know ETH's going to be scaling to however many transactions a second? Oh, did you hear that some other coin, Solana, is even faster? I'm going, it's even faster. It's more performance, right? Just lie. Just make shit up, right? It's all a scam. Don't worry about it. And if we don't take any of it, don't argue with them, don't get angry at ETH people. They'll come around. They will. And like I've said many times, I think when the market comes to it and we've got to sync countries, the crypto people will be there, as degenerate as they are, ready to party. We need them. So they're on our team. Now, everything's going to change once these things fall apart. But if they want to keep thinking that in the future on a Bitcoin standard, the best and brightest are still financial engineers, let them go for it, right? They don't know what's really happening. They don't know that the farmers are going to be rich again, and that's going to be the best job to go into, because Bitcoiners are going to buy steak for Bitcoin, right? They're not going to buy financial advice. I need to diversify. We're not paying for that, right? We're not paying for the diversify advice. We're paying for steak, and that's it. Real things or a good chair. There'll be no paying for diversification. That's for sure. So, look, SBF, one of the greatest things to ever happen in Bitcoin, and I was an enemy from day one. I was an enemy, like an actual enemy, right? I was a weaponized enemy of his. Maybe not the first minute I met him. I met him in 2018 when it was still Alameda and he was still degen trading on BitMEX. And that's why I met him. I wanted to put him in a show because he was the biggest degen I could find. I ended up having to be satisfied with Suju, who no one even knew until I found him. And I was looking for mega degenerates, right? Like I was trying to get the degenerates. We love the degenerates. They're great, right? So we didn't get SBF, but when I worked at Kraken, my job was to market size our competitor and figure out what they're doing. And I became an instant enemy because I knew I could see what was going on. Instantly, I could see. The political donations stood out to me as well as the election interference through betting markets. So I never forgot that and was an enemy of his the whole time. Go ask the people at CoinDesk when they knew he was going down. It was months before. I was telling CoinDesk about SBF before I even started this show. So, and then throughout the whole thing, we were sort of one step ahead on what was going on with SBF because we knew a lot of that, right? All right. That's what I got for today. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for coming around, everyone. 165. Yeah, you know, he's look, we're gonna have a good time. That's by Berkshire. All right. Okay, team. That's all I got. Hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow, everyone. Thanks for taking your time. Thanks for coming back. I'm glad our audience was as good as ever. I was worried we were going to lose some folks, but we did great. All right, team. I shall see y'all tomorrow. We're back on our regular schedule.